Hello, everyone, and welcome to Diplomatic Briefing. After a breakthrough in the tense China-US trade situation, Chinese factories and ports immediately became active, and companies from both countries wasted no time in making the most of the hard-won truce period to resume economic and trade exchanges. According to a CNN report on May 16th, after the news was announced, some Chinese companies saw their order volumes surge by 30%. The volume of container shipping orders from China to the United States soared by nearly 300% in a short period of time. Several industry insiders said that as companies rushed to ship out their backlogged inventory, the ports quickly returned to a state of busyness. But this also means delays and rising shipping costs. A company representative stated that this week, the shipping cost for a single container to the United States increased by about 50%, and ultimately it is American consumers who will foot the bill. The report said that even American companies are still actively contacting Chinese suppliers to ship goods, and many have even cancelled previous orders placed in countries like Vietnam and Indonesia to avoid tariffs, shifting them back to China. In the face of ongoing tariff uncertainties, the owner of an American company emphasized that he will do everything possible to stay in China. Meanwhile, the owner of a Chinese company said they are actively exploring new markets outside the United States. Ye, a salesperson engaged in toy procurement in southern China, said that after the China-US talks achieved results, his company's order volume surged by 30%, and they are currently hiring more staff to meet the demand. He described this as just the first week. Another interviewee, Liu Shanghai, is the sales manager of an export-oriented agency specializing in home decor in East China. According to him, their company's current sales are on par with previous peak seasons, but shipments will be delayed. He told CNN that the new orders have not yet been produced, so they are not ready for shipment. The report stated that as companies rush to ship out backlogged inventory, ports in both China and the United States have quickly returned to being busy. According to data from a container tracking software provider, in the 7 days leading up to May 13th, container shipping orders from China to the United States surged by nearly 300% compared to the week of May 5th. This marks a fundamental change from the situation last month. In April, US President Trump initiated a tariff war, and the ongoing escalation of trade tensions between China and the United States, along with excessively high tariff levels, has essentially brought trade between these two once closely connected economies to a standstill. On May 6th, Gene Soroka, executive director of the Port of Los Angeles, stated that during that week the port's cargo volume had dropped by about 50%, and product prices had surged to roughly 2.5 times what they were the previous month. However, after stubbornly holding out for a month, Trump finally couldn't take it anymore and decided to back down. From May 10th to 11th, high-level economic and trade talks between China and the United States were held in Geneva, Switzerland. Both sides agreed to lower tariffs over the next 90 days, reducing the tariff rate by 115%. Guo Jizhong, chairman of Shanghai Customs Group, said in an interview that regardless of the outcome of future negotiations, companies must seize this 90-day window. American companies will rush to restock within these 90 days, and Chinese companies will also scramble to ship out goods. Ben Swoi works at a Chinese supply chain management company, where he is responsible for helping businesses with product sourcing and strategies in China and Asia. Swoi said that some of these companies, due to the high tariffs on Chinese goods, have already shifted their supply chains and manufacturing from China to other Asian countries, placing orders in countries like Vietnam and Indonesia. But after hearing news that tensions between China and the US were easing, they all started calling, with clients saying, "We've already placed orders in Vietnam and Indonesia. Can you transfer my order back to China?" He also added that at present, US tariffs on Chinese goods are still higher than they were before Trump's second term. Even so, American companies are scrambling to restart previously cancelled orders or to ship out goods that have been stuck in China. The remote control cars produced by the Vietnam factory are sold to major US retailers, and recently they've been busy shipping goods from the warehouse to cope with the surge in orders. Earlier media reports stated that Chinese suppliers have been working overtime, even through the night, to meet the soaring demand from American companies. These US companies are asking them to ship out the backlogged orders within 90 days. According to a CNN report, aside from tariffs, there are other factors that will drive up the cost of living for American consumers. Viviton said that this week he noticed a rise in shipping costs. Previously, it cost $4,000 to ship a container to the US, but now the price has increased by about 50%. He said that this round of price hikes is being absorbed by American buyers, but in the end, it may be American consumers who foot the bill. At the same time, shipping companies have also reported an increase in demand. A spokesperson for the Danish shipping company Maersk said that at the end of April, shipping volume between China and the US dropped by 30 to 40%, but after positive results from the China-US talks, bookings increased, and their company is now expanding capacity on trans-Pacific routes. Ben Tracy, Vice President of Strategic Business Development at a container shipping tracking company, found that in the 7 days leading up to this Tuesday, container bookings surged by 277%. She said that the export boom in containers could disrupt the usual peak shipping season in the summer. The report mentioned that the Trump administration's constantly changing policies have created significant uncertainty affecting economic and trade exchanges between China and the US. The report stated that because Trump is wielding the tariff stick not only against China, but also against Southeast Asian countries often seen as tariff loopholes, American companies are facing a complex and urgent choice. During the 90-day tariff suspension period, should they continue to rely on China or end their long-standing business relationships with China? Matza said he had considered moving part of his production line to Vietnam, but building a factory there could take about a year, and in the end, the production cost per unit would be about 10 to 15% higher than manufacturing in China. However, he said he is not ready to completely give up on China. Matza said, "I will do everything I can to stay in China because my Chinese factory has always supported me, and I have always supported them as well. We value our partnerships and personal relationships, and they make my products excellent, so I will fight until the very end." For Chinese factories facing the same uncertainty, the top priority is to develop new markets. Vivian Tong said that they are working hard to expand into other markets, especially Europe, where they already have orders and have seen nearly 20% growth. He said they need to expand further. In conclusion, Trump's America First policy, along with the reckless use of tariffs in an attempt to decouple from China, has resulted in global supply chain chaos because the US cannot bear the pain of economic downturn. At the same time, when you look at the options available to American companies, it becomes clear that China and the US were originally the perfect partners. One has the demand, the other can provide high-quality products at low prices, but now, due to political maneuvering by American politicians, US companies are suffering much more than Chinese ones. At the same time, as reported by CNN, this also serves as a warning to those countries that think they can profit as bystanders, while China and the US are at odds. If supply chains do not shift naturally, any slight disturbance will cause orders to be quickly redirected elsewhere. In addition, under pressure from Trump, some allies have already surrendered to the United States. For example, it was revealed that the agreement between the UK and the US contains a poison pill clause targeting China, allowing the US to veto Chinese investment in the UK's supply chain. British trade experts have expressed concerns that this could provoke dissatisfaction from China and lead to countermeasures, ultimately hindering the prospects for China-UK cooperation. Meanwhile, another member of the Five Eyes Alliance, Australia, has been much more rational and clear-headed. A spokesperson for the Australian Minister for Trade recently stated in an exclusive interview with the Australian Financial Review that Australia will resist pressure from the Trump administration in the United States and refuse to join in pressuring China on trade issues. The spokesperson said that China is Australia's largest trading partner, and for Australia, trade with China is 10 times more important than trade with the United States. He said, "We do not want to reduce our trade with China. On the contrary, we hope to engage in even more trade with China." He said that our decisions on how to continue engaging with China are based on our own national interests, not on what Americans may or may not want. The Australian Financial Review pointed out that official data shows Australia's exports to China in 2023-2024 amounted to 212 billion Australian dollars, while exports to the United States were only 37 billion Australian dollars. The spokesperson also stated that the Australian government is not in a hurry to seek tariff reductions from the Trump administration. He revealed that after the dust settled on the Australian federal election on May 3rd, Australia's ambassador to the United States, Kevin Rudd, had already held meetings with US Secretary of Commerce Rodriguez and US Trade Representative Greer and had submitted Australia's revised proposal for tariff removal. However, the Australian government will not reach an agreement just for the sake of reaching an agreement. As part of the Trump administration's global tariff measures, Australian exports to the US are subject to a standard tariff rate of 10%. In addition, the United States imposes a uniform 25% tariff on all imported steel and aluminum, which also affects about $1 billion worth of Australian steel and aluminum products. According to the Australian Financial Review, having just led the Labor Party to victory in the election and successfully secured re-election, Australian Prime Minister Albanese is expected to hold his first face-to-face meeting with Trump next month, with trade issues certain to be a focal point of the talks. Some experts have pointed out that the Trump administration will likely put pressure on Canberra, demanding that Australia weaken its trade and economic ties with China in some form. John Conker, Senior Economic Advisor at the United States Studies Centre at the University of Sydney, believes that successive Australian governments have always tried to separate trade and security issues in order to maintain a balance between the US and China. However, the Trump administration does not view Australia, China, and US relations from the same perspective. It is almost inevitable that the United States will make demands of Australia. In an interview with the Australian Financial Review, the spokesperson expressed appreciation for the recent improvements in Australia-China relations. In recent years, the Trump administration's indiscriminate tariff measures, regardless of friend or foe, have also pushed China and Australia closer together. On April 28th, the Australian Meat Industry Council confirmed that 10 Australian meat companies have, for the first time, been granted permission to export lamb and goat meat to China. He said that this is the largest expansion of Australian lamb entering the Chinese market in many years, and it is quite exciting. Previously, on April 13th, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, ABC, discovered that the tariff conflict between China and the United States has also created opportunities for Australian beef exports. According to statistics from the Australian Meat and Livestock Association, Australia's exports of grain-fed beef to China have increased significantly, with exports to China exceeding 20,000 tonnes in both February and March, an almost 40% surge compared to the same period last year. The conclusion is that Trump's America First policy has awakened Australia, prompting it to prioritise its own interests, engage in more trade discussions with China, and avoid joining the US in anti-China actions, which for Australia is simply the right path.